Now we're graduating or moving on to functions. Formulas were great, as we just learned in the previous training video, when you want to add up or do some simplistic math. But functions are actually going to take these formulas and make it easier where we don't have to go ahead and manually type in so many cells. For example, I want to use the sum function, SUM. The sum function will automatically go ahead and add up a range of cells for me without actually having me to type in each cell itself and using a formula. So to get started, I'm going to click over here in the totals column here, H, and I want to be able to sum up this employee's month of January, February, March, and April all into the total here for that range. Now again, I can go ahead and select it and look down here and get the sum here, but I want it static, so I'm going to leave it here. And I want to insert the function. To insert it, if you recall, when you hit the equals key on the keyboard and you type in a character like the letter S, automatically it's going to list all the functions that begin with the letter S. I'm looking for the sum, SUM, so I'm going to type in the letter U, and I narrowed it down a little bit. There's the sum function. Now to get this function, I can do it one of two ways. I can either double click on it and then it brings it up for me, and then I can go ahead and continue with it, or let me hit escape to get out of it and try it one more time, equals SU. The other way, instead of double clicking on it, is you can use your arrow key on the keyboard, arrow down to the sum, and hit the tab key. It pulls it up just as well. Now it's asking me what number do you want to go ahead, or what range do you want to add up. And all I have to do is come over here and click and drag to see the marching ants, I call them the marching ants, around that range. And you can see it's C7 through F7, and then all I have to do is hit enter. Now it has an open parentheses. I'm not closing it because Excel actually has a cool little butler in there that if you make a mess or you don't clean up after yourself, or in this case you forget to add a parentheses, it'll add it for you. So I'm going to hit enter and then click back in the cell, and you can see up in the formula bar that it closed it for me. Excel did, so I didn't have to do that. Also, you see when I clicked on the cell, there's a little green marker in the upper left hand corner, and then it has a tag. When I click on the drop down tag, it gives me an indicator of what's going on with that cell. It's saying, look, this formula is omitting adjacent cells. Well, what's adjacent to it? It's in column G. So it's saying, hey, look, do you want to skip column G or not? In any case, I'm fine with it. I can just click off in a blank area and ignore it. Now, if you wanted to, you can click back in the cell, and I'm going to delete it. And you can actually, if you know the function, just type it out yourself. So equals SUM, and I know it's bringing it up, but I'm going to ignore it, and hold down the shift key and hit 9 to get my open parentheses, and then I can type in my range, which is C7 colon, and I want to get it through over here to the column F, which is going to be F column row 7. Automatically puts it in for me, and then I can go ahead and shift, close my parentheses, and then hit enter, and that works just as well. But then that defeats the purpose of the shortcut, doesn't it? But I want you to know that you can type in these functions if you memorize the function, the layout, instead of just actually having Excel insert it for you. Now again, you can type in equals SU and it brings it up, and you can go ahead and double click and select the function. I'm going to hit escape to get out of this. May have to hit escape once or twice. And as you know with Excel, there's more than one way to do something. So I know how to type it in to call up the functions below to use one of the functions, the sum function, but you can also do it from the Home tab over here in the Editing group. In the upper left-hand corner, they have this Greek symbol, which is the sum function. In fact, you can click on the drop-down arrow and select sum, and then you can also have average or more functions. But for right now, I'm just going to click on the sum button, and it automatically shoots out a lasso, and it goes around the numbers, which includes the employee ID, but I don't want it to include the employee ID, nor do I want it to include the column G. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag the lower left-hand corner, or you can do the upper right left-hand corner here. See that little two-way black arrow? When I see that, I can click and drag with my mouse and bring this in. Then zip all the way over to here and bring it in as well, or I can just say you're no longer G. I can just come in here and say you're supposed to be F. And you see it automatically collapses it in. And then when I'm finished, just go ahead and hit enter. Again, it's going to tell me this little indicator when I click on the cell. It says, look, you're missing an adjacent cell here. Are you sure? It's like, that's fine. I'll click off in a blank area. Okay, next, let's do the next cell here. Not only do I have the sum function here, but I can also go to the formulas tab, and there it is, right there, auto sum. I can click on the drop down arrow. I can do average or count numbers or minimum or maximum or more functions. In fact, you can do more functions, which I'll show you in just a second, or actually more functions here. I mean, it's just all over the place. But hopefully in a place that's going to be organized for you. I mean, do you mostly use text functions, financial functions, logical functions, lookup references? We're just getting started, so let's keep it simple. So I'm going to go ahead and click on auto sum. And you notice what's happening? It's trying to add up the two cells above the function, which is incorrect. Well, Excel does its best here. It tries to think logically and say, hey, these are adjacent cells that have numbers, I assume. Let's just go ahead and select those cells above, but that's not what I want. I can come in here and change it and say, look, you're not in column H, you're supposed to be over starting and beginning in column C with column C9, row 9, and all the way over. Or I can just click and drag the border of the marching ants and move this over. Now I know it's selecting 2 rows, but I can click and drag the corner of it, just go up to 1 row, then click and drag the corner of it and go over so it selects just this row but within the range from the column C to F. And that looks good. So all I have to do is go ahead and hit enter and I'm finished. Right now it'd be tempting just to click in here and drag its autofill handle down to finish it off, but I've got one more thing I want to show you. I'm going to hit undo because there's another way that you can insert this function here. I'm going to click down here in the blank cell to add up the final employees range here. And we're going to take a look at those more functions. So let's say on the Home tab, I come over here to the Editing group and click on the drop-down arrow for the Sum function and do More Functions. The new pop-up window that I can choose from a list of functions here, at least the most recently used, or I can click on the drop-down arrow and I can get some categories I can choose from. Now these categories, if you recall, are also on the Formulas tab. So I'll go ahead and click off and click Cancel, and let's go to the Formulas tab. In fact, I can click on Insert Function, brings up the same window, close out. I can click on AutoSum, go to More Functions, brings up the same window, close out. I mean, there's more functions, and then I can come down here and see if Sum is anywhere in here. I mean, you can just almost get lost in some of these unless you know what you're looking for, or insert a function, and it's going in the statistical category. So you can use this little pop-up window and choose your categories here and see if you can find the Sum function. Or you can use the Sum function there, or you can click on the drop-down arrows for these categories. Maybe the Sum function is in logical or financial. But what's easier for me in this case is selecting all if I'm not sure what category it's in, or if I recently used it, select most recently used. But for all, just scroll all the way down to the bottom because it's all alphabetized, and then go up to, there's my Sum. All I have to do is click OK and it opens up a window. You can have different ranges of cells that you can add up. For right now, this is my first range. I could have a second range, a third range. I could just keep going, but I'm not focused on all these different ranges like over here or over here on the spreadsheet. I just want one. And the only one I want for this cell here, H, is just this range for this employee here, which is going to be not above it, which is in the H column, which is Excel's not doing a good job for reading my mind. But I want it from column C10 over to the cell F10 or the row 10, and I can either type it in, which is fine, and in fact if I start typing it and I go C10, you can see over to the right it's starting to show you a preview of those numbers. So it begins with C10, which is 220, and it doesn't look like it's picking up on it yet. So let's make sure it's C10. It's actually pulling in 210.34, which is just above it, but let me finish my results here. Let me go to F10, and there it goes. Now it's looking at it instead of going up and over in column H, it's actually looking from left to right in the same row 10 because I've defined the row 10, 10 from column C to column F. And then I could go ahead and click OK, and it adds it, or I can undo that. Click on Insert Function, again go to Most Recently Used, select Sum or double click on Sum, and instead of going ahead and typing it in, you can use what's called these collapse dialog box buttons. See that little red arrow? When I click on it, it collapses. When I click on it again, it expands. Collapse, expand. Now the whole purpose for that is because, look, I have to click and drag this around. I mean, that can be annoying because I can't see half my worksheet. Well, instead, I can collapse it and then drag it around so I can see the majority of my worksheet here. And then what I can do is I can go ahead and click and drag and select the range. And you can see it. It's giving me the correct range here. I can click to expand to open it, or just hit enter on the keyboard and it pops it open. So I hit enter, and then it's haloed this button in blue, which means it's just the same as clicking on it as if I hit enter on the keyboard. But I'll click OK on it and it adds it up for me. Now you can look at this and say, well, I don't really care about the insert function. You know what? It's just easier to go ahead and click on the AutoSum and have the marching ants come out and shoot and select it for me. That's fine. But if you want to use more in-depth functions in Excel, more complicated functions, then that's going to be a little bit more helpful because this insert function feature is actually going to give you clues down here of what to do for different parts of the cells or different ranges of cells that will actually get the numbers that you want. It'll tell you what it needs in here for a value, what it needs in there for a value, depending upon the complexity of the function. So you can bring all that in and click OK and get the final result you're looking for. But again, I'm simplistic. I like to have it all done for me with the AutoSum. So I want to introduce that to you in case if you go any further with level 2 or level 3 Excel, or any further in depth with your functions. Now I'm all up for easy money here because I think money can come easily, and so hey, if you don't have to use the insert function, you can just click and drag and use your autofill, or you can delete that and just go ahead and click in the cell and click on the auto sum and just get these guys to work for you by clicking and collapsing and dragging over and hitting enter. Hey, great. In fact, let's do this as a quick review. Instead of the totals, let's look at the average for these 4 months for each employee, and then we'll do the autofill. So I'll click in the first employee's average, which is cell I7. And let's go ahead and take the average. Now we could do it old school where we click in here, as you can see on this function here, where we actually type it in. But instead I'm going to use the function, click back here in cell I7. And I don't want to type in the formula, I want to use a function. So I can click on the auto sum, drop down, and just go average. And it says, well, what do you want to average? Well, I can click and drag the border, move it over, and I say I want to average this range right here and hit enter. Now it's funny because it wanted to actually average just this cell. Well, let me hit enter. And that's the average, right? But if I go ahead and delete that, and I click on auto sum again and do average, and I hit enter, I mean, it's just taking the average of that. It's not dividing it by the total number of cells to give me my correct average. So I'm going to go ahead and hit undo, then undo again to get back to my correct average. Let me do it again. I'm going to click down here, and instead of just clicking on the drop down arrow, doing the easy, I'm going to go ahead and let me click off in a blank area, click back in this cell, and let's do it by the function. You can also click on the FX here to insert a function, and there's my average for most recently used. Select it, click OK, it gives me a pop-up that says, look, what range do you want? Or you can read the argument down here. Returns the average or of its arguments, which can be numbers or names, arrays, or references. But to keep it simple, that's why you're watching me, is the training videos to keep it simple. I'm going to click on the collapse dialog box button, click and drag, select the range, and it shows it here. Hit enter on the keyboard to pop it back open, hit enter again, and there's my average. You want to test it, click and drag. Down here there's the average, $214 there. And then I can go ahead and click and drag the black autofill handle and fill in the rest, or hit undo and just select one of these and go back to the home tab, or just right click here and left click on copy, come down here and right click on paste, right click on paste, and I can keep doing that. Hit escape key to get rid of the marching ants, and hey, it's just the same, only autofill is faster, where it actually copies and pastes in the formula, but it updates it, as you can see, when you do the autofill to go row by row. So instead of staying in the same row, which if you look at this formula is row 8, when I go to the next one using the autofill, or I just paste it, it says skip to row 9. It's got a great little brain that's running for it there. My question to you is that, what if I go ahead and delete this, and I copy and paste the formula here over here? Will it give me the numbers? Will it actually figure out that it needs to look above and not to the left like this function's doing over here to get the average? Let's try it. I'm going to select it. I'm going to go ahead and right click and copy it. Right click in here and paste it. Yeah, see, it can't figure it out. Basically, when you're copying and pasting, and let's look at the reference, it's got nothing to average it on. Let me hit escape to get out of here. And when I click over here, it's trying to average this. It doesn't work down here. Let me hit and delete it. Let me right click and do copy. Let me right click and paste and hit escape, and that works just as well. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as soon as I upload a new video, you'll be notified instantly, and you can do that by coming over here and clicking on my face. You can also click here to support me, so for $2 a month, you can have access to over 2,700 training videos, all ad-free, and for a few bucks more, you can have access to my exercises, instructor notes, quizzes, certificate of completion, and a whole lot more.